There are more than 6,000 people of Cuban descent living in San Diego County. My guest, Daniel Mera, owner of the local Cuban restaurant Andres, and SDSU professor Emerita Oliva Espin, who was born and raised in Cuba, joined me with a look at what reopening relations with Cuba after 54 years means to them. And Oliva, you lived in Cuba until you were 22 years old.
Yes.
You left right around the Bay of Pigs in 1961. Yes. Why did you leave?
Because I was beginning to teach at that time, and that summer after the Bay of Pigs invasion, Fidel Castro declared that the revolution was Marxist-Leninist, and all teachers had to revamp their education to teach next academic year, and I decided I could not be poisoning young minds with things I did not believe in, so that's why I decided to leave.
Have you been back since then?
Yes, I've been back 3 times, twice in the 80s, and then in 2011, because it was 50 years since I left, and I needed to be back there. I needed it for myself.
And I want to talk about that a little bit more, but first I want to talk to you, Daniel. Your father was born in Cuba. Have you ever been back?
No, and more than anything, it was out of respect for him. He had strong resentment to the regime that's there now.
What is your reaction, either continuing your father's reaction to the regime on this U.S. idea of reopening relations with Cuba?
I felt we had all the bargaining chips on our side. We've used the embargo as some kind of a leverage for many, many years. One part that it's never talked about, that the leverage kept their military might at a very small, reduced. The Cuban government, if they start getting influx of money, they're not going to use it for the people. They're going to use it for their government, and they're going to use it for their military. And that's where I felt that we didn't go far enough to go to democracy in this type of talks, and I was disappointed.
And Oliva, do you agree with Daniel, or do you think this is a good thing?
Yes and no. I mean, I agree with what he's saying. On the other hand, it's about time, precisely because the government has all their needs met and live very well. It is the Cuban people who are suffering under this embargo. And more important, the embargo, the non-relations with the U.S. have always given them a great excuse. Any error they make is because the fault of the Americans and the fault of the embargo. And now they won't have a scapegoat to justify all the things they're doing that have created the shambles in the economy.
You went back. How do you think that the embargo has made the Cuban people suffer?
Well, they don't have lots of medicine, they don't have lots of everyday things, and because also the government has created 2 different currencies, one that all Cubans earn in pesos and the other that it's an equivalent of dollars, what is happening is that people who are doctors and engineers and nurses are driving taxis or carrying suitcases because that's the way in which they can get dollars to get to this currency. And prostitution is rampant.
So
for both men and women.
Okay. Oliva, I mean, I want to ask you this, Daniel. Let me ask you this first. Do you think having an embassy, which is part of this plan, in Havana and opening up travel between the 2 countries will improve the situation for the Cuban people?
I would like to see the Cuban people open up their communications first before any embassy goes in. I do think an embassy has its purpose. There's still people who travel like me. I'm a Cuban-American. If I travel to Cuba, I would like to see an embassy there because you never know what kind of trouble might occur, and it would be nice to have Uncle Sam there to help you in any case. Right now, that is not the issue.
Do you are you hearing from other Cuban-Americans here in San Diego? Are they in support of this, or not so much, or is it mixed?
I've seen that the people who've lived here a little bit longer are outspoken. The people who are here very recently are not talking that much. They're still afraid that in Cuba you live afraid to talk. So even after you leave, even after my family came to see me last year, they spoke in very low tones. And I said, you're in America now, you can talk. So those are the freedoms that I would love to see come back to Cuba.
And Oliva, you have mentioned you were even at this stage a little reluctant to talk about this. Do you feel that as far as the Cuban-Americans here are still reluctant?
Well, I mean, it goes both ways. There are people who are sorry, delighted with the idea that this is open because they will be able to see their relatives more frequently without so many complications, without spending so much money that they need to spend to bring their... I mean, Cuba is 45 minutes away from Miami, and it costs thousands of dollars to get to Cuba at this point because of all the permits and all the things and etc. So there's that. There's also the people who are very reluctant to accept any change. And I have to say that I understand what people who have suffered, who have parents or relatives killed or in prison for political reasons or etc., can't just say, oh, okay, let's go be friends. I mean, for them, that's not acceptable.
Sure,
so I certainly can understand their position. But I know that whenever I have said that, oh, maybe there's a possibility, the reaction immediately is, you must be an agent of Fidel Castro.
There's still some of that Cold War fear.
Yeah, there's still of a Cold War reaction, yes.
Yes, all right. Well, we're going to have to leave it here. Thank you both so much for talking about this with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.